Hey everyone, we're almost there, almost done with day 2, so thank you so much for coming. I'm being told that I have about 25 minutes to run through 42 slides and like 7 videos, so we'll see how this goes. For those who don't know me, I'm Alex, I'm CEO of tinyBuild, been a gamer for 30 years, in the industry for 20, did a lot of odd jobs, much like the previous presentation from Adam, and somehow ended up talking here. So let's start with a few questions. I already know the answers because I know some of the faces in the audience, but has anyone here worked on a single game for over 1 year? Raise your hand. Okay. Has anyone worked for over 2 years on a single game? What about 3? What about 4? So you kind of get where I'm leaning here, right? So if the answer on average in this audience is like 3, for some it will be 4, especially if you're in AAA, sometimes you have worked on 5. How many games can you actually develop and ship in your career? If your career in the game development is, let's say, 30 years, then the math doesn't really work out. And then you ask yourself, well, how many of the games that are released today are financially successful? If you have time to make 10 games, and 1 in 100 that is released today is successful, the odds are not stacking in our favor. And I actually realized this quite early on during the story of tinyBuild. This is like a little slide of our portfolio. We started off way over here. We spent 2 years on our very first game, No Time to Explain. Then we started code development, publishing, and then it kept on growing. At one point, we started acquiring internal studios and building studios in-house. And me as a producer, I was fortunate to be able to switch between projects and kind of dive in at different stages of development in any project. And I noticed that with a lot of our partners and our internal studios, it became increasingly more difficult to stay motivated. And this slide will be important later as a reference point because today we're talking about the what, the why, and the how of DUCKSIDE. It's a little game that we developed in just under a year, and I'm going to show a brief video. There won't be audio because I don't think I have any output, so I'm just going to talk over it. This is actually 3.5 months of work because we announced the game during April 1st. We announced it as a joke. Now, we started development on it this January. Arguably, pre-production was started in December, but this is April 1st, literally 3 months of work, with an announcement trailer that people go and okay, funny joke, haha, meme game, and then why is there a sign-up for a playtest? We will talk about that one. Really easy to digest slide on what is DUCKSIDE. So, it's actually not, but I mean, the idea is that it's a persistent world PvP game, which means that everyone enters the world. There is no skill progression, as in no tech unlocks, there's no XP system, there are no levels, your loot is your gear. If anyone here played DayZ, you know exactly what I mean. I call this fair PvP or persistent world survival. That's the tag on Steam. Some people call it emergent gameplay. So it was all of that, but you can fly. So that is DUCKSIDE, right? Just accenting on a couple of themes. We're really obsessed with the idea of building these 1,000-hour games with flexible definitions of win, when any player can have their own play style. Since you have a persistent world, depending on which server you choose, you might be playing mostly PvE on a low population server. You might be getting into hyper-aggressive PvP, etc. I actually did a presentation about exactly this, designing 1,000-hour games. Just search for my name on YouTube and the DevGAMM channel, you will find it. Other aspects of this is, when in a multiplayer game, you are level kept, right? So you're level 1 essentially, and you can't essentially do anything with a level 60 character. That's a traditional MMO RPG design. So we have none of that. We have what is called snowballing, when you can spawn in as a completely new player and then take the progress, the gear of a player that has just farmed for 8 hours. And you'll have two different emotions on each side. One will be extreme pain, the other one will be, well, extreme joy. And they are real emotions. This is what I mean when I say that pain is real. And these kind of games are really difficult to design, which we'll talk about. So we essentially zeroed in on all of the things we love about this genre, about DayZ, about Rust, about Ark, Hurt World, etc. And the one thing we found we hate is running. In these games, you spawn, you run for like 20 minutes, you get shot in the head, and you respawn again, unless there is a different respawn system. But everyone hated running. So we decided to fix that by adding a flying meme character controller, which is a duck with a gun. And you might be asking yourself, like, why do this? Why are we in love with the genre? Well, there are not a lot of games in this genre. There might be like a dozen, depending on which definitions you use. And the reason for that is that it's extremely difficult to do. You know, you download Unreal Engine, you go like, I'm going to build a 64-kilometer square map. I'm going to put 100 players into it. Oh, each one can build stuff in the scene, and then suddenly you have 150,000 user-generated constructions. Your server bill from Amazon or Azure is like $5,000 per hour, even if you can make that machine run it. That's the best case scenario. Realistic scenario, your servers will crash. So this was essentially a huge market opportunity for us, is to build a game like this. And I've been an avid player of Rust and things like that, so I'll just show you some quick stats. So we launched on September 25th. We have over 120K sales right now. We spent just about 10 months in early access, and this is the actual the chart on Steam where you see the amount of time that people spent. So right now, over 10% of players have spent 20+ hours. And if I expand that, right now it logs that 4% of people have spent over 50 hours. So to answer the question of why isn't everyone building these, I already talked a little bit about the design. The technology behind this is really, really difficult to pull off. And I mean, this is realistically why we had a wave of extraction shooters hit right around this summer. Because many companies look at games like Rust and DayZ and they go, like, oh, we're going to build something like this. And then you end up building a session-based multiplayer game with Battle Royale or extraction-style elements, because the technology is just really difficult to pull off. And then the other one is design. The design of these style of games, it's very counterintuitive. So for example, these kind of games, they typically have a wipe cycle where you spend 100 hours playing all week. You have built yourself like a huge castle, lots of loot, and then you're preparing to go and kill other players. But there's a wipe cycle. It might be weekly, it might be bi-weekly, it might be monthly. And the designer inside of this guy, yeah, well, progress needs to carry over, right, between wipes. No, it does not. And what happens is the first wipe you play, you learn a lot about the game's mechanics, and then when it does wipe, instead of thinking about the gear that you just accumulated, you actually feel free to try a different strategy. Because during your initial wipe, you will have seen what other players are doing, you will have learned a lot of new things, and the way that you built your base may have not been efficient, and you realize that by learning. And it's also really easy to casualize it. During the development of DUCKSIDE, we've had so many discussions about players going like, oh, this game is very hard. Well, yeah, it's intended to be. But players need to feel real pain to be able to get real rewards. And like I said, most of these games end up becoming co-op or extraction shooters. So the question is, how? The real short version of this is that we have a game, DUCKSIDE, in our portfolio. It's a 50-player DayZ-like or DayZ Light, you get weapons really fast kind of game. It has most of the mechanics. It's written really from scratch, like a lot of underlying Unreal Engine systems have been rewritten. And at the same time, we've had the team that shipped Hello Engineer for, God forbid, Stadia. That was a fun little experiment, but it helped us build a studio that shipped a game in Unity, was peer-to-peer networking, and at the same time, when we were thinking about our next project, we were doing a lot of prototyping in Rust mods. If you want to prototype mechanics for games like this, just get the Rust mod kit. It's quite amazing. And very quickly, we started to prototype. Let's see if the video works here. So it's like one of the very first videos of us trying a flying controller. This like probably maybe day 3 of just figuring out the code after we have upgraded to Unreal Engine 5. Then, you know, we start figuring out how does the game work. And this is like rapid prototyping, right? So very quickly, we're able to start playtesting on an existing engine that does not have any of the hurdles of online multiplayer. But the drawback of that is that you have to, well, you know, you have to look in other people's code. And that is sometimes really unpleasant for some people. But very, very quickly, this started morphing into something that looks like a game, that resembles something. And the USP that we have identified here went really, really fast. I mean, the game design was crystal clear. We take the top 3 survival games, we take these and these mechanics, game design is crystal clear. So we started moving incredibly fast. What I think was the most important thing here to keep that momentum going is to not get hung up on most features that people will say like, oh, you know, our stability or our performance optimization or this and that. They are important, right? But it should never stop you from being able to playtest the core mechanics. So the team was really focused on like making sure that the build compiles every week. Like, has anyone had that when you have done like 2 or 3 sprints and go, oh shit, the build doesn't compile, everything is crashing, then you spend another week on developing. We've never had that, maybe like once for a couple of days. So the build was really stable. So we were able to achieve what we wanted, a very casual-looking yet deeply systematic game that makes you cry with really hardcore levels of experience. And like I said, we started development in January. On April 1st, we announced it, and by the end of April, let's see, yeah, on April 18th, we launched our first playtest. And this graph can be interpreted in different ways. On one hand, we just announced a brand new IP that over 1,600 people tried to log into at the same time. Well, what happened during the first playtest is a little bit anecdotal because when you're weighing in on which systems you want to actually implement and which ones you want to skip over, well, really spend a little bit more time on evaluating because all servers started dying basically within hours. So like I said, these kind of games, people can create a lot of structures, right? They're dynamically created structures. They're bases. These bases are raidable in our game design, so you can actually get into someone's house and steal all of their stuff. But you have to spend a lot of time to be able to do that. What we did not add during the first playtest is a way that the bases kind of like decay if they are abandoned. So a lot of players coming in, building those bases, and then going offline, then more players coming in. And anecdotally, we also didn't really have any admin tools at that point. So what we did is we went to our Discord that had a few thousand people, and we created these clans that would go onto a server, quickly farm up all of the explosives and blow the bases up so that the servers would come back online. That was a fun 24 hours of my life. But to give you an idea, people were building these like humongous fortresses within hours of us adding any features. Like one of the things that we've contemplated on adding was, you see some of the foundations are square and some are triangles. And as soon as you add a triangle foundation to a building mechanic, well, people do what's called honeycombing, and that's exactly what they started doing. But quite quickly, we were able to fix that. We were able to take a lot of feedback and really positive feedback on the fact that we don't have what's called roof camping. If you've ever played DayZ, you're running, then someone's sitting on the top of their base, they just shoot you, and that's it. There is no roof. You can't hide on the roof. There's no safe space on the map outside of actual safe zones. So after a lot of iteration, we launched into the Steam Next Fest that happened this summer. And I believe on average we were top 4 or top 5, and we stayed there during the whole festival. Like those peaks are during the festival. And that quickly brought us to a very interesting wishlist edition chart. I know everyone loves these kind of charts, where you can clearly see we announce on April 1st, then we do our first playtest, then we do a bunch of marketing activity, then we do our second playtest, and people, during the playtests, what we looked at is the time spent within those games, because the more people spend time in your game, the more they're going to talk about and the longer tail your sales are going to be. This is the cumulative wishlist chart, if anyone likes taking pictures of those. So, this was the first time in our 13-year history that a game launch went so smooth. As in, most of the time you're worried about two things when you start a game project. You're worried that no one's going to be interested in the game, and that you're not going to be able to deliver by with the design of the game. Here we verified both with that April 1st joke, and we're able to really smoothly go into playtesting. And actually shout out to Valve, because the new playtesting functionality and how you can easily switch builds, especially through the API, like those guys are onto something finally. Years ago we had to distribute keys ourselves, which was a nightmare. Now, the other lesson that we learned is that sharing internal technology really works for us. This is something that's kind of like obvious, right? But you rarely want to impose, game engines, especially proprietary ones, within larger companies. Here, we were able to have one team that is deep into their early access for like 3 years, give their code to another team that was really hungry to figure out Unreal Engine, and use that engine as essentially a base/template. So I think the lesson here is don't be afraid to use other people's code. This is something that doesn't happen a lot between companies, and that's something that I actually want to change. It's kind of like if someone built some sort of unique tool set, something that really improves their workflow, I do believe it's worth sharing that technology and figure out an arrangement between yourselves. We have so many tools available within the engines natively, but not all things are solved, especially when it comes to networking. All right, I'm going to skip this one. Just real quick, if anyone wants to hear me talk about these things in recordings, I've done 2 recent presentations this year about exactly the subject and also how to pitch games. And closing thoughts, because I'm being rushed off the stage. So I think this is an example where developing a game really quickly, what it did is it gave us a lot of information. First off, it's financially successful, which is great, right? We all love it when people actually play our games. But what we actually learned was that we also had quite a mismatch in expectations. If anyone's looking up on the SteamDB charts right now, the online has gone down significantly. And we do believe that is because there's a mismatch in the premise of the game and how hardcore it is. Because it's cartooning graphics, it's a cute little duck wobbling, oh, it's a duck with a gun, oh, it's a duck with C4, oh, it's a duck going into my base, oh my god, I'm crying because my progress for the past 8 hours has been wiped. And this is, I think, the only lesson, because usually when we do post-mortems of projects that have come out, there's like, a deep story behind, like, oh my god, this went wrong, then we had to tackle that, we had to tackle this. First time ever. I was like saying with my producer Mike here, we were like, where's the fire? Like, are the servers burning? No. Is the client crashing? No. Are people enjoying it? Yes. What's the main complaint? It's too hardcore. Like, casuals. So if anyone here in the audience wants to make a shooter MMO based on things that I've described, let's talk. I'm really interested to hear, because what we want to do is we want to, when we have the opportunity to either license out or figure out some sort of arrangement, if you ever want to make a game like DayZ, we have the tech for it, and let's talk. And also, if you want to pitch us in games, here are my contacts. I'm still on X, or Twitter as it is still known. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. That was absolutely fantastic. It's actually incredible.
I sped run through a presentation about how to speedrun games.
You're the man. We do have time for a question. If anybody wants to throw a question up here. No? Oh, yes.
Alex, thank you very much for this presentation, for sharing your experience. I'm building MMO Shooter as well, so I have a question on your slide. Why isn't everybody build such type of games? There was a point. You can design as a content game, needs to be system driven. Can you elaborate on that thought? What do you mean?
Do you have an hour? No. So the basic
After
premise
the
is when you think about content in games, there are two ways to think about it. It's just like, you know, actual content that you add to a game, right? And other people, especially in single-player, like story-driven style games, they'll think about as experiences that you experience once, right? So to me, a system is something that you don't experience once, and that can also combine itself with other systems. So if you're building an MMO shooter, the example would be, you know, you add hunger, right? And then you add whatever you use to get the hunger out, right? But then what if you collect berries, right, as a means to alleviate that hunger, right? But then you can also make tea out of berries. Then you have a system that combines with it too. And the more you add them and the more they are combined together, yes, it's content. You need to make the model, you need to program it, etc. But it's a system that scales the whole game. And that's the main approach. So if you're making a a location where there are NPCs and they're guarding loot and you need to shoot them, right? Think about how to, like, maybe there's a dynamic nav mesh that you do there. Actually, don't do a dynamic nav mesh. That's a terrible idea for a large map. Do like random spawns, right? Do like random locations to make sure that essentially a dice roll every time you add content to the game, so that people would want to experience it hundreds of times.
Thank you.
We've got one more.
Two more.
Hey Alex, thank you for a talk. The question is, well, you did this game really fast, like under a year. What do you think? Are we kind of witnessing the process of like game turning to be shorter or dead? You know, this 2, 3, 4 years, and if you are not the AAA title, what do you think? Is it true? Like, are you either like fast or you dead? What do you think?
If you are fast when you have verified that something works, right? So find a way to check if people are actually going to need what you're playing or if they're going to be interested, and then also find a way to bring them the absolute minimum scope that they would want to buy in early access, right? And also use a lot of playtesting during the way.
Thank you. We got one last one over there.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for sharing. Alex, too. I'm developing a Castlevania meets Legacy of Kain game, and something that I found very interesting about what you show is that Friday for testing. Can you explain how that happens and what you collect from that experience for the sprints, etc.?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the keyword? Collecting what?
What feedback experience? How that happened? Helped the development process. I found that interesting.
Yeah, so when we do playtesting, we usually do a feedback form. You can do like a QR code, you can do a link. Just create a simple Google form. Think about the questions that you're really interested in. Ask about the things that players don't like, and then use ChatGPT to analyze that, and that gives you a clear picture.
Actually, what I thought that it was is the whole team playing every Friday.
Oh, every Friday, yes. That's the step before. Every single Friday, play your game, especially if it's a multiplayer game, play it for at least 4 or 5 hours. I know it takes up a lot of time in the week, it's over 10%, but what happens is that no one ever has any question on what decision to take. And then you don't need a top-down approach with the game's director saying, oh, here is your task, here is this task. Like, you literally have everyone on the same page at all times because we're playing together, we're laughing, we're crying, we're like, oh, this is an awkward bug, we should probably fix that. And someone is already going to fix that, right? It's shared ownership of the project because there was no question on where the game is going except for like a few, like minor design things. But if your build is compilable, especially in a multiplayer game, you should be playing it. You should be finding things to add to it every week while focused on some of the longer term goals.
Okay, I'm going to have to call it.
All right, I'm being rushed off stage. Thank you so much.